Welcome to Bitcoin Fixes This, where we explore the impact that Bitcoin will have in all aspects of society. Today's guest is Samson Mow, CEO of Jan3. We talk about the scaling war days, his journey through the Bitcoin ecosystem, and his various roles at UbiSoft, Pixelmatic, BTCChina, Blockstream, and his new role at Jan3. We also talk about his new company and how he hopes to bring new countries into the Bitcoin fold. Samson Mow, how's everything going?
It's going good, Jimmy. How are you doing?
I'm good. Where in the world are you right now?
Right now, I'm in Canada, West Coast Canada.
Okay, all right. So how's the lockdown stuff over there? Everybody talks about how oppressive it is.
Well, there's some hope. We're opening up gradually. I think you still can't come into Canada unless you're vaxxed, but hopefully that will change soon. But overall, you have freedom of movement. You don't have to mask up anymore. But Trudeau is still a useless prick.
Yeah, he's definitely an interesting guy, and he's good for Bitcoin though, because he's like putting us all on the map.
I guess you could look at it that way, on the bright side, right?
Yeah. So Samson, you have one of the more interesting histories in Bitcoin. I still remember kind of you popping on my radar in like 2016 with all the scaling wars and stuff like that. But I think it would be good for my audience to sort of like learn where you came from and how you got into Bitcoin, because I actually don't know your Bitcoin origin story.
All right. Well, I guess my entry into Bitcoin is by accident. I had started reading about Bitcoin in maybe 2011 to 2013. Just like I used to read a lot of news, and I pretty much stopped. But back then, you'd see Bitcoin pop up in headlines like dark markets and drugs and whatnot. And I would kind of look at it, but I wasn't that interested in it because I didn't know how it worked. And then I saw one article, I think it was 2013, that really made it click for me, which was about Bitcoin mining and how to set up Bitcoin mining. And prior to that, I kind of just imagined Bitcoin as a virtual currency, like a game currency or something like that. But the mining article really turned on all the gears and lights in my head. So I started trying to set up mining. I created a slush pool account. I created everything you needed to start mining, but it was already too late to do it on like a low powered laptop, right? So I didn't mine anything actually, but I did set it up, and that kind of kicked off the thought process and made me understand like, okay, this thing is different. It's decentralized. Anybody can participate, and there's nobody under the curtain. There's no one behind the curtain running it. So that was when I started getting more and more into it. And I guess when the time I officially say I was a Bitcoiner, it was 2014, late 2014, when I actually got my first Bitcoin. And then when I joined BTCChina, one of the biggest crypto exchanges back then, in 2015. So maybe I discredit myself and I say I came in later than I should have. But I would say like when you get your first Bitcoin is when you're a Bitcoiner. So it's fair.
2014, huh?
Yeah.
So how'd you end up at BTCC? Because I don't know if many people that listening to this podcast remember, but it was a huge, company. They had to shut down because of the restrictions in China. But for a while there, like there was a lot of stuff going on in there. How'd you end up there?
Yeah, sort of by accident. So I had known Bobby, the CEO, like years ago before he was at BTCChina. And I was running my own game company, Pixelmatic. We were just kitty corner across from each other in Shanghai. So I had offered to be an advisor to help him set up a mobile development team to make their mobile apps better. It wasn't working that well at the time. So I just went there a few days a week in the afternoons as an advisor to hang out and help them recruit people. And then eventually there was like a political battle inside the company, and then the COO was ousted, and then Bobby asked me to take over as the new COO. And yeah, from there it's history. And then, as you mentioned, we kind of got sucked into the scaling wars because BTCChina was a big exchange. And a lot of people today maybe don't understand how impactful BTCChina was, but I would say it was as big as, say, Coinbase is today, or Bitfinex or Kraken, but it's definitely a top tier, top level, and highly influential back in the day.
Yeah, it was definitely a huge exchange. And a lot of people forget, but China used to be such a huge market for Bitcoin. And, obviously it's more now known for miner equipment manufacturing, but the exchanges were pretty huge, especially 2013, 2014, 2015.
Yeah, so essentially after Gox imploded, all the traders went to BTC China. So
Hmm.
overnight, BTC China became the biggest exchange in the world for a good number of years. And then eventually you had the other exchanges like OKCoin and Huobi come up. And then you had like the big three in China that drove most of the Bitcoin trading volume in the world until,
Hmm.
we were all shut down by the PBOC.
And that and leverage trading took over with some of these places. But let's go back even further, because you're a CEO of a gaming company and everything else.
Mhm.
Like what's your background there? Like what did you like? How did you get into that business? And obviously you were in close proximity with Bobby, so that's how you got into Bitcoin. But what's the story before that, and what were you doing?
So my trade is game development. I've
Mm,
been doing game development since 2005, working on
mm,
AAA games like Company Heroes, Dawn of War. These are big RTS titles. And then
mm,
I was at Ubisoft and expanding their market into Asia. So we set up a
mm,
development studio of about 200 people in Western China.
mm,
And I did a lot of online games. I did a Smurfs game on Facebook. I did Scott
mm,
Pilgrim, Xbox title, and Might and Magic: Heroes Kingdoms, a web and mobile title. So I've been doing games for a long time, and
mm.
I'm just here by accident. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm here in Bitcoin, but I'm here in Bitcoin and in games still because Pixelmatic is still running. We're still building an MMO game, so
Mm,
we've been working on this title called Infinite Fleet, and I've been trying to incorporate a lot of Blockstream tech into Infinite Fleet. So the
mm,
game currency is issued on the Liquid sidechain, and
mm,
we're creating NFTs for the spaceship so that people can do atomic swaps when they trade game currency for game item.
mm. Well, so going back to the whole game development thing, like there's a lot of different aspects of game development. What part were you involved in? Were you doing that? I don't know. Were you doing project management or like getting the artwork or, testing? What was the aspect that you were most involved in with the games?
Right. So yeah, there's a lot of disciplines in game development. Obviously, people know
Mm-hmm.
there's art and then
Mm-hmm.
QA. Everyone tries to get in at the QA level. Then there's game design, there's production and engineering, and a lot of supporting disciplines. But those are the major ones.
Mm-hmm.
My entry point was in game balance, which was a subset of design. So
Mm-hmm.
this was at Relic. We had a balance department because we were building a real-time strategy game. It's sort of like StarCraft, right? You have multiple
Mm-hmm.
factions, and each faction is fighting against the other faction. So the important thing for a real-time strategy game is every faction has to have a fighting chance. So we
Mm-hmm.
just say the game is well balanced. That means I could pick any race in the game, and I should have more or less the same chance to win fighting against
Mm-hmm.
another race. And that is relatively simple to do when you have three races, like in StarCraft, right? You have
Mm-hmm.
Protoss, Terran, and Zerg. But for Dawn of War, we started with four and then kept expanding to more and more races. So it gets very, very complex. But what you're essentially doing is tweaking the units, their stats, their numbers, their damage. Because Dawn of War had physics involved, we have to add another dimension of density, weight, and time to return to battle. So you can get knocked away as a unit, and then you have to run back and get back into the fight if
Mm-hmm.
you're a melee fighter, right? So this is
Mm-hmm.
a extra dimension of complexity that, say, StarCraft doesn't have, right? StarCraft, they just bunch up, shoot, or hack at each other, and then they die. But we have to actually account for physics. So it's a very complex balancing act between a lot of different elements. And I guess there's a similar aspect to that too in Bitcoin, right? You have
Mm-hmm.
multiple competing interests in Bitcoin, from miners to wallets to exchanges. And there's a very delicate balance between everything. And of course, the people running the nodes. So
Mm-hmm.
everything has to be balanced to work in harmony, just like in a game.
Right. And I imagine like the economics there are also important because what the units cost and making sure that that's balanced with and the amount of time it takes for you to produce it and things like that. Those also are part of the balancing equation, or is it not? I don't
Yeah, definitely. So there is an economy, but I would say
know.
it is less impactful in this kind of instance game where you just launch
Hmm.
it and then you fight the match and then you're done. This
Hmm.
is actually far more important in online games. So in
Hmm.
even the social games that we built, they're
Hmm.
persistent worlds and you're accumulating money all the time. So the
Hmm.
Smurfs, Castle and Co, these social games, Might and Magic Heroes Kingdoms, these are effectively like you can think of them as an MMO game, right? You're persisting through
Hmm.
time and you actually do have to deal with a lot of economics in here. You have to deal with things like inflation, getting towards
Uh-huh.
hyperinflation. You have to create sinks for the game
Uh-huh.
currency, or else the game currency becomes worthless. You have to price things accordingly, or else people don't value them, or they can never afford them, or they're too cheap. So there's a ton
Mm.
of these little knobs you have to deal with and tune an economy. And that's also why I was interested in Bitcoin, because for a
Mhm.
good couple of years I was creating these online economies, and some of these game economies, they're really hardcore and they hire real world economists. Like, let's not discuss how well economists usually are, but they do hire game economists to run a game economy, much like you have central banks running real world nation state economies. But it's
Mm.
pretty intense, and there are just tons of similarities between gaming and Bitcoin. I think, at least.
And well, and the real economy, right?
Oh
Because
yeah,
you
yeah,
have people like working for certain things. I mean, there was that whole meme of what Chinese gold miner must die or something, gold
yeah.
farmer. I forget. But yeah, in these virtual world, you get this interaction that you don't necessarily expect as a game developer. And obviously we have parallels to that in Bitcoin, but yeah, I mean, how do you balance all of that as a developer? Do you just sort of like tweak settings, like? And sort of change the rules all of a sudden? Are you hard forking your software all the time?
Well, basically, a game is centralized, so you can change anything.
Uh-huh.
You
Mm.
can change how much something costs. You can change the rate
Mm-hmm.
of earning. So when you're playing World of
Mm-hmm.
Warcraft and you're killing like a mob or a monster,
Mm-hmm.
you can get more gold or less gold, and you can also
Mm.
change other costs. So the money sinks can be changed as well. So how much it costs to repair your armor or to
Mm-hmm.
list an item for trading, like all of these things are completely mutable. And that's why
Mm.
Bitcoin is so interesting, because you have a
Mm.
predefined rule set and then nobody can change it from there. So, I mean,
So different things stay the same versus a game and Bitcoin.
yeah, so much like the real world economy with the central banks, they can change anything.
Mm.
The game
Mm.
developer can also change anything. And as you said, we're tweaking as much as we can to kind of
Mm.
maintain a sense of stability. But there's always this battle against, because game currencies historically have been like money printing, right? There's no limit. You
Mm.
can kill a billion monsters. You can be a gold farmer and kill a billion things or 10 billion things, and you'll get more gold and you'll inflate the money supply, right? And that's
Mm.
partly why they don't like gold farmers. Players don't like gold farmers because they mess with the economy. But it's the same for the Fed, right? Except for the Fed doesn't
Mm.
have to do anything. They just add a zero
Mm.
and then they're done.
Mhm.
So
Mm.
games are more economically sound in some way. There's at least proof of work involved.
Yeah, well, I remember people used to complain. I never played World of Warcraft, but there's like camping for a monster
Yeah.
or something like that. They spawn at a certain hour, and you're there in line with like 40 other players that are waiting to kill that monster or something, and you just kill them, take the loot, and then go or something like that.
Yes.
It's just like kind of crazy because if you spawn them too quickly, I guess you make too much money for the economy, and then everything gets more expensive or something like that.
Yeah. Well, players kind of figure out what the best ROI is, right? And this is like players are always optimizing. Players are not stupid, just like
Mm,
people are not stupid,
mm,
right? You can figure
mm,
out like if I kill these monsters, I'm going to be able to work for like an hour a day and get more gold than if I played for 8 hours killing this lower priority target, right? So they're
mm,
optimizing, and everyone's optimizing, and then you basically have the best regions to get money, and that's
mm,
where you get into fights between players trying to get that mob, right? They're all trying to get that thing as soon as it spawns.
Yeah, that's so interesting because in a sense it's similar to Bitcoin in the sense that everyone is kind of competing, except it's over finding proof of work, and it's like
Yeah.
it's a different kind of everyone can try take their hack at the monster basically.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So you come from almost like an economics and like balancing game theory kind of background. So what was it like for you to learn about sort of like the game theory behind Bitcoin?
I think there was definitely a learning curve. So I
Mm,
think some people will remember, but I was originally way back when in favor of
mm-hmm,
bigger blocks because I thought
mm,
it was better that we didn't have high fees so we can encourage the growth of the Bitcoin network. So I kind of fell into that same logical trap that the Gavin Andreessen and Mike Hearn were pushing, which is it's good for the network. We should make this small change. It's not a big deal, right? It's a
mm,
very simple logical trap to fall into, and you come
mm,
in with good, well-meaning intentions, but actually you're eroding Bitcoin's entire value proposition by doing that.
mm,
So
mm,
I can understand when people don't fully understand Bitcoin because a
mm,
lot of things in Bitcoin are incredibly counterintuitive, right? Like the fact that you have to set up a mining operation and you might be profitable or you might not be profitable depending on if you get a block or not, right?
mm.
And there's just tons of these little nuances and intricacies that make Bitcoin what it is. But for most people that don't go down the rabbit hole and try to understand it, they'll just fly right over their heads and they won't understand it at all.
Mm. Yeah, so you're developing all of these games and you're learning about all of this stuff. How'd you end up starting your own company? And what was sort of like the motive behind that? Like, I assume it's because you like games, but what else is there that attracts you to that industry?
Well, I'd always wanted to start my own game company. So after I had my stint at Relic working on
Mm,
AAA games, and after I had my stint at Ubisoft, basically building a new studio from ground up and launching several successful games that were highly, highly profitable and had like tens of millions of users, I thought it was a good time to start my own company.
mm,
You know, it's the entrepreneurial spirit. You don't want to work for
mm,
someone else. You just rather work
mm.
for yourself, and you know, it's capitalism. I'd rather make money for myself, right? But yeah,
Mm,
like I think it's good to do your own thing, and then you can effectively create your own vision. You don't you can optimize the company in ways that you think are the best. You can cut out inefficiencies. You don't have to have meetings for the sake of meetings and deal with all the bureaucratic stuff that you have to deal with in a big, massive public company.
So you started this company in China, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
2011 we started it in China, and it's actually a Hong Kong entity.
Okay. What was the decision behind that? Was it to appeal to the growing gamer base there, or was it like for labor costs, or what was the reason?
Mainly because I was living there, so that was where it started, and we just
Mm,
created it in Hong Kong because it was easier to do business deals and stuff out of Hong Kong than in China.
I see. And that's when you met Bobby, and because he happened to be like across the hall, and you went to BTCC.
I probably knew him when I was still at Ubisoft, so like pre
Uh huh.
2011. We just knew each other from social circles. So Shanghai is a
Mm.
big party city, and we used to go clubbing. So we just know each other from the
Well,
club.
you and Bobby clubbing like 12, 15 years ago or something like that,
Yeah,
huh?
I mean that was what you did in Shanghai back then. There's tons of clubs, and the scene was pretty good, pretty happening.
Mm. Okay, so you get this COO role at BTC China. What was that like? As I mean, you had a lot of different sort of dynamics. Like we were saying, there was a lot of traders that were on BTCC, and there was you guys were like producing poker chips and like you know I think you had a mining pool and you
Yeah,
made like the little square coins or something like that. I forget what they were called, but it was like minted things. I
yeah.
mean, you did so many different things with that company, and like what was that like? Like it must have been like kind of heady times.
Yeah, it was a pretty steep learning curve for me running an
Mm,
exchange.
Mm,
and learning about Bitcoin more at the same time, and then getting pulled into the scaling wars. So I would say it was quite overwhelming at that time when I first joined. Everything was happening all at once, right? We also had launched the mining pool, I think, in that same year that I joined in 2015. So
mm,
it was like one trying to fix the exchange because the tech stack
mm,
was a bit aging
mhm,
and there was still a lot of growth. So the company was growing very rapidly. I think when I joined, it was 40, and when I left, it was like 200 something. But
mhm,
it's just there's like so many things going on, and we did a lot of products, interesting products, as you said. Like we did the BTCC
mhm,
Mint, we did
mhm,
titanium Bitcoin coins similar to the
mhm,
Cassius coin. So you peel off the
mhm.
hologram, and then I think because Bobby likes poker, we made poker chips too. So the poker chips are also like Cassius style with the hologram and the
Mhm,
private key in it. And
mm,
the probably the coolest thing we did was the titanium block. So
mhm,
it was a big square chunk of titanium, pretty heavy if you hold it in your hand. On retrospect,
mm,
we should have done it with tungsten, but
mm.
hindsight is 2020. But this block, effectively, the private key in it had an entire Bitcoin block reward. So it was like
Mm.
25 BTC in one big titanium chunk. So that was pretty badass. I think that was the my favorite product that we made my favorite physical product that we made.
Yeah, I think I remember thinking, oh man, I kind of want to buy one, but there was like 2 BTC premium or something like that. So I was like, I don't know, I don't know. And Bobby did invite me to China at some point, but I was like, I never really had a chance to go, and now I might never go because the place is freaking closed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that whole thing was interesting because obviously you were pretty prominent in the scaling wars. I think due to your trolling skills. Can you describe like how you got involved in the debate and why your name sort of became synonymous with the small blocker size? I guess.
Hmm. So it was because BTC China had the mining pool, and I think at our
Mm-hmm.
peak we are like 18%. So when those guys were trying to convince all the miners to run their software, so when I say those guys, I mean Gavin and Mike Hearn, they were
Mm-hmm.
contacting all the big pools, and back then the hash rate was far more centralized. So you only had, I don't know, like 8 or 9 big pools that really
Mm-hmm.
were dominating the scene. So they just had to call up 8 or 9 pools and say, "Hey, it's time to upgrade." But that was really how I got pulled into it because I was doing the day to day, running the operations of the exchange and pool. They were the ones that reached out and said, "Hey, we need to jump on a call." I think it was on Skype, and they're
Mm-hmm.
explaining like, "Okay, we're Bitcoin developers, and it's time to upgrade to Bitcoin XT." And
Mm-hmm.
you know the story from there, but I think I gained a lot of prominence because I was the only C-level executive at a big Bitcoin company that was speaking out against it, the effort to change the Bitcoin consensus rules. So at the time, you had Brian Armstrong with Coinbase. Coinbase was not as powerful as it is today and impactful, of course. But I mean, you literally had every single Bitcoin company trying to quote unquote scale Bitcoin. And I was the only C-level exec that would say, no, this is a bad idea. And I don't think Adam counts because, obviously he's the CEO of Blockstream and Blockstream is the company behind it. So I was the only voice aside from developers and
Mm-hmm.
Blockstream that was saying, maybe this is not a good idea.
Hmm. Yeah, and you obviously like grew your following on Twitter as a result of that whole thing. And I remember some of your trolliest tweets; they were fantastic. I think people were like cheering them on and stuff.
Yeah, the secret was we had a lot of long meetings at BTC China. So I would
Uh
just try to pass the time on Twitter.
huh.
And most of the trolling was directed at Brian Armstrong because
Mm,
he just walks right into stuff, like he had that
mm,
PowerPoint deck comparing Bitcoin to a web browser and saying it's good to have many different implementations of the software. And then you have like Internet Explorer and Chrome and Firefox. And yeah,
mm.
there's tons of great stuff that he just sets up and then you just hit it.
Yeah. So you did a lot of that, but later on, Bobby signs the 2X agreement. Can you tell us like the inside story of what the heck happened there? Because I think for a lot of us that were watching, it was kind of a shock to see his name on that like DCG led agreement, and like other people like Voorhees and Wences, and obviously people like Brian Armstrong signed it and stuff. What was going on with that whole thing? Because from the outside, it was just like, wait, these guys are meeting behind closed doors and made some agreement. It's like, what the heck? Why are we left out of it? Like the users.
Right. So during the bulk of the scaling war, I was the main voice from BTCChina handling it, right? So that was why the messaging was very consistent and on point. And then at some time I left, and it turns out like Bobby didn't agree with me. So I think he did a 180 later on. And I think you were on that cruise with Roger Ver. You remember that one where you had a debate with him and whatnot. But Bobby was there too, right? And that was when Bobby was talking like maybe Bitcoin Cash is the real Bitcoin. Do you recall that?
I remember he said they're both my children, and Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, something like that. He gave some diplomatic BS answer, but yeah.
But I mean, he was definitely supporting the forks, and I guess we don't see eye to eye.
So that was after you left, I guess. When did you leave? I don't remember the time.
I left in what year was that? 2017.
Okay, so you left for Blockstream in 2017.
Yes.
Okay,
and I think that was around the time that he came out.
Yeah, and why did you leave to go to Blockstream? Was it just like a better role or something else, or did you want to move, or what was the deal?
Well, I was planning to move back to Canada, so Blockstream's team is mostly in North America and all over the place. But yeah, I just planned to move back for family reasons, and I also wanted to do something more for the Bitcoin protocol. So I decided maybe now's a good time to join Blockstream, and I think Blockstream needed my help at the time too. I don't know if you remember Blockstream before me, but it was a different beast, I would say. And then it looks a lot more like a company these days, and it's quite successful, I would say. So I think they needed that business and marketing finesse that I brought to the table.
And so you leave early in 2017, and Bobby sort of like turns more towards the 2x, big blocker side. Like, was that like kind of shocking to you? I imagine you had been communicating with them before.
Well, it was really busy. Like the scaling stuff was kind of my department, so I just handled it mostly on my own. And then maybe after I left, he started getting into it, and then he discovered Bcash. And I don't know, but he kind of caught bits and pieces of it. But I guess maybe I never really talked to him at length about it because there were just so many other things to discuss, like running a company. There's tons of other things, right? The scaling war was kind of a side thing, but yeah, I guess maybe we didn't sync up enough. And then after I left, he kind of tried to figure out on his own, and maybe he figured it out the wrong way.
It was interesting because like even his brother didn't agree with him. So it was like, what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, Charlie was always on the right side and understood how things worked. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Like both Charlie and I had tried to talk to him, and we were not successul. So he kind of went down that route. But I mean, it doesn't matter now, right? Because it resolved itself, and it's all good.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out what happened behind the scenes, because I think other than maybe the block size war, the book, like a lot of it just felt like it just sort of happened behind closed doors somewhere. It's like, okay, who like did Peter Smith like go threaten Bobby Lee or something? Like there's got to be some salacious story or something, because it just seemed like such a turnaround for the company, because you were representing them, and it was okay. Yeah, they're the one like rational company in China. Like all the other companies in China seem to be, trying to go along with whatever DCG was saying.
Well, it's more about I would say it's more the companies in China were trying to go along with what Jihan, the former co-CEO of Bitmain, was saying, because he wielded a ton of power. And I would say he was more influential than Brian Armstrong back then, because he made most of the ASICs, right? The S9 was the dominant miner. He had most of the farms, and he had most of the pools. So
Mm.
he wielded a ton of influence and power back then. And all the companies in China kind of tried to fall in line with him, not to piss him off, but I didn't really care. But I would say maybe Bobby got pressured by Barry Silbert from DCG, because DCG was also
Mhm.
an investor in BTC China,
Mm.
albeit small, but still an investor. So
Mm.
probably trying to be diplomatic and cordial. I mean, that's the whole crux of the scaling thing, right? Like, how can you not
Mm.
agree to the compromise? Are you not a
Mm.
rational person? Like, why can't you
Mhm.
compromise, right? So
Mm.
he probably fell into that trap and said, okay, Barry, I'll compromise. And maybe it's a good thing. We
Mm.
should stop fighting and do this compromise. That's my
Mm.
guess, but I don't know the exact details, because I was cut out from a lot of that stuff. You remember, I was blocked from one of the New York meetings for the New York agreement.
That's right. That's right. And all of that happened, I guess, behind your back too.
Yeah,
But yeah, obviously, like 2017 was very eventful, and you were sort of in the middle of it, being, I guess, COO or CSO of Blockstream.
CSO.
What CSO, right? So, what was your tenure at Blockstream like? What do you remember about it or what are you proud of, I guess, having done there?
So I would say a couple of things. One was after I joined, well, so Blockstream had always wanted to get into mining, but I actually went to Adam and we went to the board to present a concrete plan of how to get into mining. So we bought some containers from Bitfury shortly after I joined, and we started mining. And then
Mm.
I went to Montreal and I secured the lease and power purchase agreement. We call it a PPA with Hydro Quebec to get cheap electricity in
Mm.
Canada, and then we started building our own facility. But coming off of the block size wars, it was a really important thing to decentralize the mining out of China, right? And I think nowadays you look back in hindsight and you can see, okay, that was a very important thing to start doing, because if
Mm.
everyone just stayed in China, then it would have been much more disruptive when the Chinese government banned mining.
Mm.
But starting the mining was probably an important thing for Blockstream, because we needed a revenue stream. The software side
Mm.
was not a revenue generator. So
Mm.
having two pieces of the company, one doing R&D software products and one doing a profitable mining operation, was very key for success. The
Mm.
other thing that I think I was proud of doing was launching the Liquid network. So
Mm.
Blockstream had announced this and was getting companies to join. And
Mm.
this was in 2015. And I think in New York, I was one of the first companies to join. So BTCChina, Bitfinex, Kraken, and a couple others were the first ones to sign up for Liquid. But it
Mm.
it was not really going anywhere. So they didn't ship out the functionaries. They didn't get exchanges to integrate. And that was one of the first projects I took on when I joined, which was actually launching the thing and getting the boxes out to all the different exchanges and getting all the exchanges to integrate. And I'm really grateful for Apollo and the Bitfinex team, because they were one of the first big exchanges to actually support Liquid. And I think the degree of adoption we have today is largely thanks to their foresight and their ability to execute. But yeah, so I guess mining and Liquid are my two big things at Blockstream. And the other parts are just building up the BD team, building up the marketing team, making our comms and social media a lot better than they were back then.
Mm. Okay, so you've also worked on this El Salvador bond thing. Can you tell us more about your involvement and everything else that you've been doing with respect to that?
Yeah, so in El Salvador, it was largely engaging with them about a Bitcoin prior to the law. So we were advising them on Bitcoin security, cold storage, a number of Bitcoin related topics. And in the course of that, because there was this volcano bond meme created by Max Kaiser and Alistair Milne, so me and my team at Blockstream, we put together a pitch and said, if you really wanted to do this thing and make the meme a reality, here's what you would do. And here are two options for a volcano bond. So we created two proposals and a bunch of modeling around those two proposals. The first proposal was the bond as you know it right now, which is a $1 billion bond, 6.5% coupon. Half of it goes to buy Bitcoin and half of it goes to mining. And the second proposal was a future flow model. So effectively creating an entity to do mining and share profits from that mining operation with the holders of that bond. But the two things were basically potentially what you could brand it as a volcano bond offering. And they got really busy with the launch of Chivo after the law passed, and discussions kind of went quiet for a while. But then after Chivo was launched, we resumed discussions on the different offerings. And then I went to El Salvador, and then we decided that they were going to do it. And then I announced it with the president, Nayib Bukele, on stage at Feel the Bit. And now we're just waiting for all the pieces to come into play and the new digital securities laws to pass so that they can actually issue their bond.
Well, so where is it in that process, and when can we expect an El Salvador volcano bond to come to market?
Well, it's really up to them. They were very busy with the gang violence in the last few months, and I believe that was also why the president didn't make it to Miami. But it seems that situation's under control now, and they might have fixed the situation for good. So I've heard that they're turning their attention back towards the economy. So potentially we could see the laws going to Congress, the new digital security laws going to Congress. And there potentially may be other laws. The president has said there's 52 new laws that they're working on for things like citizenship, permanent residence, and company incorporation for Bitcoin City. Basically everything you would need to do business in El Salvador and also to do the bonds. But these will go to Congress, and then if they pass, then probably in 2 to 4 weeks after that, you could see the bond offering launched on the Bitfinex tech platform.
Oh, wow. So it would be directly on Bitfinex that you could buy a bond, or can you buy it elsewhere, or is it just Bitfinex?
It would be just Bitfinex.
Okay. Wow. So that would be interesting. So you'd have to get a Bitfinex account in order to participate in the bond. And I think U.S. citizen or U.S. IPs can't access Bitfinex, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. So they block a number of people from different countries. I think the U.S. is one. I believe Canada is another. But there are going to be people that cannot access the offering, which is unfortunate. But that's just the world we live in today.
And would bond investors be able to get in on this, or like what are the restrictions there?
Well, as long as they could create an account and go through the KYC process, then they'll be able to do it. The question is, are the traditional bond investors going to do that? And I don't think so. I think the first buyers of the bond are likely going to be big Bitcoin whales or crypto people that want to support El Salvador or get citizenship. Maybe some forward-thinking hedge funds that are agile might be able to do it, but the old school institutional bond investors probably are not going to be able to do this. And that doesn't preclude them not being able to do it in the future, because El Salvador could do another offering somewhere else that would be underwritten like a traditional bond, and that could be opened up to traditional bond investors.
Well, so when you're releasing a bond, don't you do some sort of like a roadshow, kind of like a pre-IPO kind of thing, but like telling the people that would buy it, hey, here are the prospects and stuff like that? Or does that not happen?
No, they'll need to I don't know if it's going to be a real roadshow, but they'll need to publish their offering doc. It's called a key information document under the last draft of the law that I saw. So it's like a mini prospectus, but it would detail the exact specifics of the bond offering, because what we showed on stage was the proposal, but they need to first have the law passed and then write the prospectus to comply with the law and the regulations, right? That's why there's no prospectus now. And people are always asking on Twitter, like, where are the details? But until the law is passed, you don't know in what state the law will come out looking like, right? There might be some Congress people that say, well, we should change A and B, and we should add C. And then, of course, the offering would be different. So there's a clear order of operations here, which is law has to go to Congress. They need to discuss it. And maybe change it, pass it, then the Ministry of Finance, which is the issuing entity, would complete the prospectus and their offering doc and marketing materials and whatnot, and then socialize that with the public. And then there'd be a period of time where people would be able to sign up on Bitfinex potentially, and then buy the bond tokens.
Wow. Okay. And is it still a 6.5% coupon, and then like you get some upside on the Bitcoin that's being bought by issuing the bond?
Yeah. So the original design was a 6.5% coupon, a 10-year bond. You get the principal back at the end of the 10 years. But the interesting twist is after 5 years, so 500 million will be used to buy Bitcoin. After the 5-year mark, they will sell off some of the Bitcoin to recoup their initial $500 million investment. Then they'll share 50-50 all Bitcoin upside. So they'll keep selling it over every quarter and splitting that upside with the holders of the bond. Now, El Salvador doesn't need to sell their Bitcoin. They could just mark to market. So they can say, we're going to sell this and distribute to you, and we're going to quote unquote sell this, and then we'll keep it in our cold storage wallet after that period. So I think that would be the better thing to do, so that they end up with another chest of Bitcoin at the end of the 10-year period, which could potentially be used to pay off all their other debt. So that's an interesting thing that could come to pass, but it's still 10 years from now, so we'll see what happens. But I think with Bitcoin price moving the way it usually moves, it's not impossible to say that a quarter of the Bitcoin proceeds from the first bond might pay off all their debt.
How much debt do they have? Or are you just talking about the debt from this particular bond?
I was talking about all their debt. I think they're at 11 billion or something like that.
Oh, wow. So a $1 billion bond, $500 million buy. Yeah, that could definitely do it, depending on how Bitcoin performs, obviously.
Yeah, but they do want to
who do they owe that money to?
It's like traditional bond investors.
I see. Okay. And what did they want to do? Sorry.
So they probably want to do more bonds than just this first one. So the first bond here was planned for doing geothermal Bitcoin mining, but potentially they could do additional bonds to raise the capital to build Bitcoin City itself.
I see. And what would that be backed by? Like the infrastructure there, or utilities there, or something like that?
There's a number of ways you could do it. I mean, you could create a corporation like the Dubai Development Corporation, and that could share revenues. You could do it based on land, so land appreciation. But I think it's still early, and at least I haven't really discussed it with them. But I don't know what exactly they're thinking about doing a Bitcoin City bond. But there's a number of ways to tackle it, I think.
Okay, so you've gotten some experience sort of helping a sovereign state get into Bitcoin or use Bitcoin in a way that makes sense for them. You're doing that for other countries with your new company. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, so I left Blockstream in March, and then I announced my new company, Jan3, at the Bitcoin 2022 conference in Miami. So Jan3 is meant to accelerate hyper-Bitcoinization. So that's obviously, you can tell it's a pretty broad mandate. Part of that mandate will be helping nation states onboard. So if they want to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender, we can advise them on that. If they want to build some infrastructure projects that use Bitcoin, we could help them with that as well. But yeah, Jan3 is here to help change the world. The other part would be we want to encourage more people to use Bitcoin. So so Jan3 will take over the Aqua wallet from Blockstream, and I plan to invest a lot more resources into Aqua to make it.
Is that the successor to Green Wallet or something else?
I don't know if it's a successor, but it's definitely a cousin or brother or sister to Green. Aqua was always meant to be an easier to use wallet that your grandma or grandpa could use. So it reduces a lot of the complexity, and it shows like liquid assets and Bitcoin in one view. So you don't have to like toggle between different wallets. And yeah, like I would like to add Lightning to it. I would like to add more support for liquid NFTs to it. But there's a ton of things I want to do with that, but I think the most important thing is to try to make a really accessible wallet that people can use from anywhere. Maybe we'll focus on LATAM.
Well, so let's talk about some of these countries that you are starting to have influence over. Can you tell us about, I think it was one of the islands in the Azores or something, and then Panama, I think it was? Yeah.
Well, Panama did it on their own, or they're doing it on
Okay.
their own. So this is the cool thing. A lot of these things are happening, and I'm not involved at all, which is great because my time is limited. But we've seen Panama is almost at the stage of implementing a cryptocurrency law, but it is mainly focused on Bitcoin. But they're opening the door to other things as well. Whether you think it's good or bad, you can look at it from a number of different angles. And then you have the Central African Republic that just did Bitcoin as legal tender. So that's a done deal. But the cool thing is countries are starting to do it on their own, just figuring things out by themselves. So it's really great. The few that I announced at Bitcoin 2022 were Madeira. It's a autonomous region of Portugal. So the president there, Miguel Albuquerque, he is adopting Bitcoin. So they didn't make Bitcoin legal tender. There is no cap gains, so they will try to embrace Bitcoin and adopt it. So potentially rolling out payments for government services using Bitcoin or other municipal services, much in the same vein as Lugano in Switzerland. So they say that they did Bitcoin de facto legal tender because, as you know, in Switzerland, there's no cap gains, right? So if the government is accepting Bitcoin for all payments and they're encouraging merchants to use it in the city, then it's almost as if it were legal tender, right? And if you think about it, it doesn't really matter. The key is that countries are adopting Bitcoin because even in El Salvador, even though it is Bitcoin legal tender, they're not enforcing that. So it's more like the Bitcoin law is an endorsement, encouragement to use Bitcoin rather than a firm rule, right? Because technically legal tender means you must accept it and it should be enforced, but it's not. So I think any region adopting Bitcoin, either doing it as legal tender, de facto legal tender, or just eliminating cap gains and encouraging use is about the same. So that's Madeira. And then we also had Prospera. It's a semi-autonomous region of Honduras. So you're familiar with the free private cities movement, right?
I think so. Yeah.
So,
can you describe it for my audience, though?
It's just a plan to create private cities effectively that are governed on their own and largely autonomous. So Prospera is effectively a special economic region in Honduras, and they're able to create their own laws. The only thing is they have to follow Honduran criminal law, but every other body of law, they can create their own, and that is exactly what they've done. So they actually did make Bitcoin legal tender in Prospera. So you have a tiny toehold in Honduras, and maybe one day all of Honduras could potentially embrace Bitcoin, but it's a start. And then in Europe, you have Madeira, an autonomous region of Portugal that is a toehold into the EU. So these are both starting points. And of course, like Jan3 and myself, we're working with people in Mexico, Ricardo Salinas, in Deer Campus, to see if we can get Mexico to adopt Bitcoin and a number of other countries. But it's largely driven by Bitcoiners on the ground in these countries, and we're just helping out as we can.
Well, so what's your role? So say, I doubt it, but say somebody from Costa Rica or something is listening to this podcast. What services do you offer to help them, adopt Bitcoin, I guess?
Well, I guess it's going to be tailor-made to every region. So like in the example of Madeira, we can work directly with the government to integrate payments. But it really depends on what they want. If they just want advice on cold storage, then we can become a consultant effectively. But there's no like menu of services that we offer. It's more about we're here to help, and we're not looking for money. Like Jan3 has raised capital already. We should be good for a number of years. We'll work on our own products like Aqua and potentially others that will generate revenue. But the nation state stuff, it's more about helping them and advising them. Like take El Salvador, for example. When I was helping them from Blockstream, like there was no commercial agreement. There's no payment. We're just here to help and answer questions
Mm.
and give them ideas and work together.
Mm. Wow, very interesting. So you raise some money, you have capital. What's your long-term vision for this company?
Well, I think the goal is to accelerate hyper-Bitcoinization. So the first step would be to build up Aqua, and then down the road, we'll see what opportunities present themselves. But I've got a number of ideas that I've been kicking around for a while that could potentially help decentralize Bitcoin, augment Bitcoin, and get it into the hands of more people around the world.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. Sounds like you've got a lot on your plate. You're probably one of the busiest people. Where can people find you? Where can people contact you?
Sure. So my Twitter is at Excelion, EXCELLION. And then if you want to follow Jan3, it's at Jan3com. Jan3's website will be at Jan3, the number 3.com, but there's nothing there. It's just a placeholder image. I've been too busy with the corporate structure and everything else to bother with the website, but that is there.
Oh.
And if you want to reach out to talk nation state adoption, you can send an email to coffee@jan3.com.
Coffee, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, you do enjoy your coffee. Well, thanks for coming on and describing to us a lot of this stuff. It's kind of like, trip down memory lane a little bit.
Yeah, it's been fun, Jimmy, and I'm sure I'll see you many times this year. La BitConf.
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah, probably, and some other places, sure.
Yeah, and you're doing a class in El Salvador, right?
That's right, and that will be over the summer, and Stacy is organizing a lot of it, so grateful to her. And if you're a developer in El Salvador, you should apply.
Yeah, I think we've committed to sponsor some of it. So if
awesome.
I'm there, I'll definitely try to go to El Salvador while you're there. It'd be good to hang out in the motherland.
And Bitcoin motherland, sure.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Samson.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Unchained Capital is the sponsor of this podcast. I'm an advisor to the company. I know the team well, and I am excited for what they are building. If you need multi-sig, collaborative custody, or a Bitcoin native financial services partner, learn more at unchained.com. Welcome to Bitcoin Fixes This, where we explore the impact that Bitcoin will have in all aspects of society. Today's guest is Samson Mow, CEO of Jan3. We talk about the scaling war days, his journey through the Bitcoin ecosystem, and his various roles at UbiSoft, Pixelmatic, BTCChina, Blockstream, and his new role at Jan3. We also talk about his new company and how he hopes to bring new countries into the Bitcoin fold.